Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to our viewers around the world in Oromia, Ethiopia. Today, we're here to discuss about Oromo Support Group Human Rights Abuse Reports. Here with me, Dr. Truman, Trevor, and Dr. Bayo Tuguma with me, and also Society Arista, journalist, here with me to co-host the discussion. Dr. Truman, if we start from you, in your OSG report, the title called "Empire Strike Back." Let's start from there. Why did you choose that topic, that title?
Well, obviously, trying to have a catchy phrase to catch people's attention. Yeah, the Empire Strikes Back is exactly what's happening in Ethiopia. We have forces that are committed to unifying Ethiopia against the people's wishes there. We're gone back 200 years in terms of the political dynamics in Ethiopia, where we have one group asserting control over the rest of the empire. So hence the title, Empire Strikes Back. With this, we began the 22-page report of human rights abuses in Ethiopia since the present regime of Abiy Ahmed came to power in 2018. The killings began in October of that year, just a month after the OLF's triumphal return to Finfinne. And this report brings the total of killings that the Oromia Support Group has recorded to 1,342. Now this is only a fraction of the abuses that are occurring. We know this because our coverage has been patchy, both geographically and in terms of time. We have some periods where we don't get any information at all, and some areas where we've had very little information because of the media blackout. The killings have been particularly noticeable in Western Oromia, in particular in Wolaga, and in particular in the Kelem area of southwest Wolaga. In Western Ethiopia, out of that 1,342 killings which the Oromia Support Group has recorded, in the West, 442 of those have occurred. So a third of them have occurred in Wolaga, basically. And 320 of those have occurred in 2020, showing just how the killing machine of Abiy Ahmed has accelerated its lethal activity over the last year. The numbers are increasing, and we're still getting reports of killings in 2019 trickling through. So we can't say these are exhaustive totals, but so far we've recorded over 505 killings in 2019. Now that includes 100 Kimant people in the Amhara region and 150 Sidama in the Southern Nations, Nationalities and Peoples region. And in 2020, we've recorded already, there'll be thousands more to come, but already we've recorded 837 killings, including 58 in Wolaita, in the Southern Nations, Nationalities and Peoples region, and 60 Amhara at Guliso in Wolaga. As you know, this was blamed on the Oromo Liberation Army, but this was clearly perpetrated, this massacre was perpetrated by government forces in an attempt to vilify the name of the Oromo Liberation Front. But in addition to these bold statistics, we have information coming out showing just how much in jeopardy the whole judicial system in Ethiopia is. Judges are being detained and sacked because they don't follow the government line. They're too lenient on OLF suspects, for example. And most disturbing is the reports of increasing numbers of people being taken out of police custody and summarily executed by soldiers, the Oromo Special Forces. And we're seeing more and more people being dragged out of prison where you'd think they'd be safe from further abuse apart from the mistreatment of prison. But these people have been taken out of prison and shot dead and left in the bush. So this is the worrying report that the Oromo Support Group has just brought out, and it's showing an increasingly unstable situation in Ethiopia, a very worrying situation indeed.
Thank you, Dr. Trump. I'm going to pass on to Tesfaye if you have any additional question or for Dr. Bayo. Sorry, I cannot hear you.
Yeah. Still, Dr. Bayo had go ahead and add to what Dr. Human said regarding the top title is selected for the report as to why you chose to name it that way. And besides, for both of you, there was another report issued recently, this past week, after your report by the Human Rights Watch. Did you try to draw some kind of lines of similarities between the two? Especially Human Rights report was very, very general and not even as detailed as yours. Any reasons, any problems you think both of you share as human rights agencies? I mean, the situations on the ground, like what Dr. Truman said, like limitations to access to information or restrictions of the media, the freedom to send out your people, your agents, and gather information. And what do they look like? Are they worse than before or better? And just for both of you, anyone, Dr. Brown can take it, and then Dr. Truman can add to it.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us. I think Dr. Truman has effectively covered not only your first question, why the word empire strikes back. I think if you look at the atrocities committed by successive Ethiopian regimes, what is the ultimate goal? Why are they doing that? It is all about the imperial's action that constituted what we call Ethiopia today some 150 years ago. To bring the rest of the nations in that region under their imagined Ethiopian nation, they had to murder in thousands Oromos and other nations and nationalities in that area. And then we came up with Ethiopia. Well, one may argue that Ethiopia is not the only country that is constituted through that kind of action. Nations always invaded other nations, and in the process, what we see as states started emerging. As right as that may be, what makes our situation different is it did not end up at the time of the constituting the nation Imperial Ethiopia. Once people woke up and started questioning for their rights, asking for their rights, once the kind of I would call colonized or occupied nations and nationalities, including Oromia, started asking for fairness, for justice, the intensity of that atrocity simply increased. If you look at what happened under Haile Selassie and then under Mengistu, who also probably was not in the business of building imperial state, as were the previous kings and queens. However, because of his commitment to that, maintaining that forced unity, not through equality, not through negotiation, but through the imaginary one language, one religion, no opposition, principle to keep that empire together, continue to harden the occupied people to even resist more, and then the response from the imperial state was continue to kill. Then we got to the TPLF regime or EPRDF regime. It is true, the way the political philosophy was laid out, the ethnic regionalism, the ethnic-based regional system was a great idea. Nobody opposed it, but did EPLF or did EPRDF govern the country according to the principles that they declared? I'm afraid not. To the extent it allowed the creation of clearly demarcated region, it did. To the extent language, different regions were allowed to develop their language, it probably did. But at the same time, the system was more used for the purpose of really silencing everybody, creating this impression on the international state, Ethiopia is a democratic state, but at the underground, all what the regime did was basically use the local people to exploit everything, anything that they were able to lay their hands on. As people started resisting that exploitation, the EPRDF responded by murdering again whoever dared to come out and oppose them or complain. So when the title basically brilliantly put together accurately reflects what is going on right now under Abiy. It is basically to take away even the slightest benefit that other nations and nationalities got under the EPRDF regime. The current regime wants to eliminate that and take us back to 150 years ago. That is the scary part. And to make that happen, the way they try to articulate, the way they try to say it to the international community or international audience is that these and the groups or the politicians who represent their people, nations, and nationalities are there to break apart the country. Of course, nobody is interested in breaking apart the country. People are asking, I want to have a say in how I want to govern myself. Nations and nationalities are demanding I should be the owner of the property in my region, but I should be allowed to use my language, to develop my culture. And then within that framework, we can come and have that conversation on how we can coexist in what used to be Imperial Ethiopia, but rather in democratic Ethiopia. And regrettably, that is not what is happening currently. And the killing, the extrajudicial killing, the elimination of politicians, the elimination of ordinary citizens, simply because they are being alleged to be related to individuals or groups that the regime claims are participating in OLF or in Oromo Liberation Army. They simply kill both relatives and the individuals they allege are members of these parties. And that is a scary scenario, and that is really something that we have never seen in the history of that country. And to make the matter worse, the regime that is perpetrating this is known outside Ethiopia and inside Ethiopia. It represents Oromos, particularly for us, is the most disastrous reality that is unfolding. It is disastrous simply because people are asking, particularly international audiences asking, what do you guys want? After all, you are the ones who are in power in Ethiopia. The truth is, no, we are not in power in Ethiopia. It's the system that is a problem, and the system is literally a system that wants to bring back the system that we have rejected, Ethiopians have rejected, and we thought we ended it in 1974. But here again, somebody who is celebrating the reincarnation of the imperial system, renovating palaces all over Ethiopia, shamelessly displaying the thousands of limousines that the previous kings were driving when the people are starving to death, as something that we can now reconstitute and brag about it as a nation that has these classic collections.
Okay.
Let me stop here. Yeah, but the title, in my opinion, is well thought out, Dr. Trevor. That's correct. It's imperial striking button.
Thank you, Dr. Byron. Dr. Truman, if I come to you, in comparison, if you look back with TPLF eras and the last 3 years, when you look at the images coming from Tigray, the images coming from Oromia region, the images coming from Benishangul or Walaita, southern part of Ethiopia, the detention laws and rules from the government. When you compare with TPLF, do you think Abiy government is worse or better than TPLF?
It's always difficult making comparisons. And I once asked Martin Hill of Amnesty International whether he thought the EPRDF, how did it compare to the Mengistu days, the Derg military, communist military dictatorship days. And he refused to be drawn. He refused to make a comparison because whatever you say, it's going to be wrong in some areas and right in other areas. Both are extremely abusive regimes, that's for sure. Both are putting people in detention without fair trial, and both are guilty of killing people summarily, extrajudicial execution, disappearance, torture. These are all features that are common to both regimes. And in terms of numbers, it's a bit too early to say, but certainly this regime is on a par with the previous one, if not exceeding it in terms of the body count in the last 2 years, especially since Tigray, of course. We know that scores of thousands are being killed in Tigray at the moment. And this is, well, it's certainly war crimes are being committed. Whether it's qualifies for the term genocide or not, I do not know. But certainly there are very serious abuses going on in Tigray at the moment. The abuses in some ways are less sophisticated and more brutal, more primitive under the current regime. The people being hacked to pieces, people having their heads cut off and displayed in public, people having their genitalia cut off, children being raped, boys and girls being raped by soldiers. This is just lack of discipline. It's it shows that the forces who are doing this are not doing this for sophisticated reasons. It's just blind, racist hatred that's driving the current regime. Any resistance to it is met with lethal force. This happened with the EPRDF, we know. Thousands of students were killed by the EPRDF more recently. But the nature of the abuses now seem to have less respect for the people that they're killing. Yet this regime is just as good as, or even better than the previous regime in terms of manipulating the international media. The foreign journalists that grow up and live in Addis Ababa have more connections with the urban Amhara elites than they have with any other groups in Ethiopia. And it's not surprising that the majority of reports coming out of Ethiopia are heavily biased against the Oromo and against all the peoples who want a degree of self-determination. And we've seen the result. In Al Jazeera just recently reported 80 and then 207 killings in Benishangul Gumuz. Opposition in Walaita has been crushed with killings of demonstrators. Opposition in Sidama has been crushed in the same way. It's everywhere that people show any objection at all to this unified single monolith of Ethiopia that used to be portrayed really as a version of Amhara culture by the international media. And we're seeing exactly the same thing again now.
I think over Solomon.
Go ahead, Tafai.
Yeah. For us, not difficult, Dr. Truman, to say it's worse now than before. Very simple explanations. I mean, these people are the same after all. It's EPRDF in a different uniform, different clothes. That was it. And simple facts to say these ones are worse than before. Like Urjii was focusing on reporting human rights violations. You are very well aware of this, but we never saw in our 4-year time, we never saw an Oromo taken out of jail, killed, and thrown in a bush and given to hyenas. Now we are counting this at least once in a week or 2, 3, 4, and this is something very different. The rest is the other what you mentioned as less sophisticated rapes, a daughter in front of her mother, wife in front of her husband, all that, and damaging properties, farms, crops stored, all that. And that being as it is, in your report, in the summary, somewhere you said, let me see, the opposition to the government's plan for a united Ethiopia with limitations to the present federal structure. You said that we see some kind of urgency now to hold the election, which they said no, to be held at its right time. And in this group, urging to have the elections are the ruling party, PP itself, IZEMA, how do you put it in English? Ethiopian Citizens for Social Justice, Abin in Amharic, and the Ethiopian National Movement, and Balderas. Like last week, they had a 2-day conference in Bahar Dar, and now these people are like very, very, very like moving to have the election. And do you see something in common that relates to what you said in your report? Like what we know about these parties is that they are at the top among those who are pursuing this agenda of dismantling the system in place now, the federal system in place, which they describe as ethnic federalism, which is not for us. And especially these all facts you and Human Rights Watch mentioned in your reports, respectively, being on the ground. I mean, the realities on the ground being what you both mentioned, reported in your reports, and which means when there is no environment to even hold elections, most of the country codes in war, like northern Ethiopia, the whole Tigray, Benishangul Gumuz, Oromia for the past 2.5 years under command post, where there is no environment that allows to have election. Why are they caught in like moving fast to have it, especially these four groups, when still others, strong opposition parties, saying no. And one of their reasons being their political leaders, representatives, or in jail and their offices shut down and not being allowed to meet with their constituencies, all that.
Okay, thank you very much, Tesfaye. I must say, the last time I saw Tesfaye Daressa and Solomon Namara together was on the front page of an Oromia support press release back in 1997 when you were both arrested by the EPRDF and spent the next 3.5 years in prison. There are three responses. You ask about people being taken out of prison and killed. It isn't exclusively the Prosperity Party that have done this. The EPRDF did do it. They did do it to an extent, and certainly people who are held in military camps were often taken out of their cells, and they would say goodbye to their cellmates because they didn't know if they were coming back. And I've interviewed people who are in detention, especially in Hamaresa in Harare, and that military camp. I remember I've spoken to at least 2 people who were detained there, and they were talking about the horrendous things that happened to prisoners there under the EPRDF. And what's happening now is as bad as that, yes, but EPRDF, we should not forget, were terrible, terrible masters in that government. I am reminded of bullies in a school classroom. If you imagine 2 bullies in your class who are fighting each other over who can take the pocket money from everybody else in the class. This is what's happening in Ethiopia now. We have the Amhara bullies were taking all our resources from, well, up until 1991. And then it was the Tigrayan bullies who were taking our resources from 91 until 2016 or so. And now it's back to the Amhara bully who wants to knock out the Tigrayan bully and then be free to take the pocket money of everybody else in the class, just like the Tigrayans have done now. The problem with this is that it's very wasteful. The resources of the whole empire, or half of the resources of the empire, were funneled into the development of Tigray. And now it's being wiped out, it's been bombed back into the Stone Age by the other class bully who wants to take over and therefore start taking the resources from the rest of the empire to which they feel entitled yet again. The whole idea of elections is farcical at the moment. You can't have elections in a war zone. It's ridiculous. And you can't have elections if all the opposition is either dead or in prison. It's a ridiculous suggestion. You release the politicians and then we'll have elections. And I tell you, if you do release the politicians, the Prosperity Party won't last 5 minutes. That's me.
No.
Okay.
Maybe if Dr. Baru has to add on it.
Yeah, let me quickly add to what Dr. Truman brilliantly stated for you. Focusing on the why part of the equation. Why are they doing? Why did they suspend election? Is that because of COVID? Really? We just concluded our election in the United States, the biggest democracy on earth. And COVID was very much alive here. And it didn't stop the United States from having this election. So that is fake news. I'm sorry for using that word. Number 2, you have to just go back and go through the archives of the YouTube videos that have been broadcasted by the Prime Minister or his speeches that are being put out there in public, where he repeatedly stated, let me just give you one good example. At a meeting, their party meeting, that is the Prosperity Party meeting, the Prime Minister is on record informing the party members that in this country, nobody else but Prosperity Party that has ability to govern. The reason, according to him, all these different opposition parties, they can't even afford to feed themselves right now. And all the so-called opposition liberation fronts, we saved their life from wherever they were refugees and brought them back to this country. Currently, forget about managing a country. They don't have the skill and the ability and the knowledge to manage their own affairs. And this is, I'm not quoting it word for word, but I'm just giving you the message. And if you go back to this, you see. Therefore, the Prime Minister concludes, it's only you sitting in this room who can run this country. Be prepared for that. And not only that, he said for the next 10 or 20 years. So that sets the stage, and in my mind, there is no ambiguity why, in terms of the rationale behind what the government or the regime is doing currently. That is, lock up everybody that has any prospect of winning an election in prison or kill them, which they have done. If you look across the political map of Ethiopia and you ask yourself who are the major competitors, democracy is the number of games. The regime in power is in power by the name of or representing Oromo. So if today election is held, assuming all the political parties are allowed to compete on a plain level field, I don't think there is any issue as to who is likely to win, and particularly in Oromia. And if you know who is going to win in Oromia, then the obvious reality is that that entity cannot and should not and will never be the entity that tortured Oromos for the last 27 years. So I hope I'm getting my points clear. So the reason behind what has been happening, suspension of election, jailing everybody else, killing the few that are so prominent in that, particularly prominent Oromos, like Achalu. And then now, rushing to hold election, it is a mindset where they have come to conclude that literally we have wiped out any potential opposition that is likely to win an election. Therefore, the Oromo 50 million people don't have 40 million people don't have any option anyway, but vote for us. And then if we capture the vote of the other so-called partners in that prosperity party, they're already guaranteed about fulfilling their dream of ruling Ethiopia for the next 30 or 40 years to transform Ethiopia to the world superpower, as the Prime Minister clearly stated. So that is why I'm not surprised with the decision to rush to have an election. Are they going to succeed? Wait and see. That's what I can say.
Yeah, if I go back to Dr. Byro again, Dr. Byro, if you look at the situation, the report, everything is more, the government is more focused in Oromia and the Tigray region. I'm not saying it's not happening anywhere else in Ethiopia, but the main focus or target is Oromia or Tigray. So why do you think the government mainly focused on this region?
Well, that again, in my mind, is relatively easy, quite frankly. First, Tigray, in terms of armament, is the region that has already established itself at a time when this relationship broke down as a strong supporter of the federal system, and the regime being the major committed to creating a united Ethiopia in the image of imperial Ethiopia. The disagreement is pretty obvious. Don't forget that these are people who began the political journey together, where the TPLF in that group got that power through the barrel of a gun that they used, whereas the others were basically entities that TPLF created to pursue its own agenda. Okay? Then came the time, thanks to Oromo Kero, that literally forced the dominant party, the TPLF, among the EPLF folks to abandon Finfinne and go back to Tigray, the folks who are currently shepherding the sheep got the opportunity and got hold of power. So why did they start from Tigray? Why did they have to go and ask for international help to get rid of TPLF? I don't have to tell you, by now the answer is pretty clear. Get rid of any threatening power over there, and then they have repeatedly said that we will go after OLF and Oromos, particularly the incarnation of imperial agenda, who supporters, you know the region I'm talking about, they are at the forefront in the war. They participated, the militia participated in the war in Tigray, and they have said it in public. If you look at all the videos that we were releasing, all the charters in mass media, we are now heading to Oromia. Now that we've taken care of Tigray, the rest is easy. So why they started in Tigray blunt the potential threat in terms of force. And then the clear understanding that Prime Minister had abandoned his people and joined the people who espouse reincarnation of Imperial Ethiopia, the Amhara region, the Amharas. They are shooting for creation of or rebuilding of Imperial Ethiopia. Whether they will succeed or not, I'm afraid time will tell again.
Thank you, Dr. Bayo. To try you and
So a bit taking you back, these people look and sound very determined, Dr. Truman, to hold this election. Like they are telling us how many members they have, like OPD, OPP 10 million, Amara PP another 10 million, and others. Even the collaborators, the business people, contracting companies, all that, making a huge, very, very huge contributions, like million, 10 million, even 100 million. You might have heard one company giving 100 million as a donation, they say, because they know that they are going to get it back. And the determination is because only one alternative, we all know, only one choice these people have, sticking to the power in some ways. Otherwise, ending up in jail and losing all that they have been looting for these 28 and 30 years. And what can Oromo and others do if they go ahead? And we know they are going to rig the elections the way they have been doing it in the past 5 rounds, and they're going to declare victory. What's the way out for this all, not just the results of the election? And it's like we call it Ijana Tifte, says Oromo. This is coming to one's eyes, like especially targeting this existing federal system and even the constitution. These are one of what they are openly talking about reforming or completely changing it, restructuring the country. What could the people do?
Thank you. And I'm not a politician, and I'm not the leader of any group of people. I'm merely a concerned and very angry individual. But I've been watching things for a few years, and I believe I've learnt that the people who had the most success with the least sacrifice of life were Kero. They changed the history of that country, and it is Oromo youth and other youth that will change the history of that country again. We are on the right side of history. There is no doubt that totalitarian regimes, which this will have to be in order to keep control over the population, they are beginning to be a thing of the past. There's a growth of recognition that democracy is the most efficient way of running people, and that the human right of self-determination is gathering pace. More people have self-determination now than ever before, and this will continue. The people who try and oppose this, the dinosaurs, if you like, the people who want Abiy Ahmed to be Menelik III, these people are going to be left behind by history and will be a laughing stock. They'll be the same people that still want to have slavery, for example. They'll be the same people who deny climate change. They will be seen as redundant. They'll be on the rubbish heap of history, whereas the Oromo will be pushing the agenda forward for the whole of Ethiopia. And we have to resist, like Karo Kare did before. And we have to make more efforts to control the media bias against people who are in favor of freedom in Ethiopia. We have to correct this media bias in favor of Abiy Ahmed and his Messiah complex. Even Meles Zenawi didn't want Ethiopia, didn't think it would become a superpower in his lifetime. And he didn't say he would kill anyone in his way like Abiy Ahmed has done. This is a colonialist mentality, and they're clearly out of touch with reality and very dangerous people. Our job, as I see it, is to hopefully accelerate the political process that will bring freedom and democracy to all the peoples of Ethiopia, to accelerate this and to do it with fewer people being killed than are currently programmed to be killed by Abiy Ahmed and his cohorts. They're clearly planning a campaign of extreme violence against its own citizens in order to keep them in control, and at the same time blame those citizens for any violence that occurs. So resist peacefully and get the media on our side. They will become on our side eventually, but there are still some very ignorant people out there, and there are still some people who have been very heavily biased by the milieu in which they're surrounded. People who don't really understand the plight of the majority peoples of Ethiopia, rather than just the ruling elites around Finfinne and in Shoa. Thank you.
Yeah, if I ask you, Dr. Truman, this question is actually for both of you. Dr. Truman, you already touched on it a little bit in your discussion. I'm always wondering if there is human rights organization, just like OSG, Human Rights Watch, different media organizations reporting the atrocities in Ethiopia, everywhere, in Oromia, in Tigray, in Benishangul, everywhere. For the last, even during the TPLF era and now, during Abiy Ahmed's era, I was always wondering why is that the international community are turning their blind eye on such atrocities all the time. Why are they not mad at these issues as you do?
As you know, Solomon, my views on this are quite extreme. I think the world would be a lot better place if we made the simple decision that human rights were more important than money. And it's purely because money and economic development and your country's power compared to the rest of the world, it's purely those things that keep people interested in stuff that doesn't matter. It's greed for power and influence that's driving the current problems, and it's based in Ethiopia on good old-fashioned racism. Human rights organizations have been complaining about Ethiopia for a long time and are complaining about the current regime. I naively, in the 1990s, when the Oromia Support Group was set up, I thought all we had to do was to tell people about the abuses that were going on, and therefore support for the EPRDF and TPLF would just fall away. But of course it didn't. The more you tell people about the abuses that are going on, the more excuses they give for those abuses, and the more lies they will tell in order to continue supporting the regime which supports their interests in the region. I've been sadly disappointed by several governments now who claim to have human rights as high up on their foreign policy agenda. I wish they don't. And there is not one government in this world that puts human rights ahead of profit. Look at Britain supplying weapons to Saudi Arabia, despite the carnage they're inflicting on the people of Yemen. And this is the UK, which is meant to be a democracy. And we've had demonstrations. We've actually caused the supply of arms to Saudi Arabia to be stopped by demonstrating. But the government has now overridden those stoppages, and we are again supplying weapons to Saudi Arabia. So don't look for outside support if your case is based on human rights, because outside support doesn't depend on human rights. People still want to deal with Putin. They still want to deal with China. They still want to deal with Burma. They still want to deal with Venezuela. And it's all horrific places in terms of human rights. So let's have no more of this garbage that Western democracies are defenders of human rights. The people who really defend human rights are the people who have their human rights abused. This is the people that we're talking about. The Oromo and the other peoples, the other oppressed peoples of Ethiopia. That will include Amhara people too, by the way, with whom we must talk.
Thank you. Dr. Barrow, if you want to add on that.
Yeah, well, let's not forget one part. As far as nations are concerned, they are first and foremost acting for national interest. It supersedes anything that a nation could focus on. Breaking down that, where would that national interest be better protected, particularly on international scene and relationship with other nations? There is no one single formula that I can tell you, but each nation would look at range of factors before they come to the conclusion of taking side or taking which side in a situation where conflict exists to protect that national interest. The value part becomes secondary. What do I mean by that? Let's look at during Reagan regime, the United States relationship with a country like Congo Zaire. Mobutu Sese Seko was the butcher among various African countries at the time. And he was receiving incredible support from the United States. And that was officially accepted. The US was trying to suppress the spread of communism in the region. To stop that, they have to sacrifice the interest of the poor Zaireans and keep this murderous regime in power for a long time before the problem of South Africa started getting some solution, and then they abandoned the poor guy. So I can go and cite many, many more examples as to how nations deal with their national choices they make when it comes to protecting their national interests. At the value level, Western democracy always emphasizes that, but as I just told you, the example I just gave you means they can sacrifice that value to protect that national interest. Second, the problem we're dealing with, particularly for Oromos in terms of getting attention in the international scene, one, don't forget that from the time we are occupied up to now, we are being excluded or deprived the opportunity and the right to just educate ourselves, nothing else. In doing so, the ruling class from all the way from the imperial time up to now, they did sell Ethiopia as the symbol of, I wouldn't call it as Amhara, but as a nation, Christian nation that had this incredible, whatever language and culture, all of which refers to the northern culture, the northern religion, the northern language, did not have anything to do with the rest of us. So many people, even today, do not know who Oromos are, or they haven't even heard the word Oromo to a large extent. I know what I've gone through during my professional career, traveling around the world. When I say I'm Oromo, not Ethiopian, who is Oromo? What is Oromo? That was the kind of response that I was getting. So the point I'm trying to make here is that people are not yet working up to the issues, the atrocities that is committed against Oromos and other smaller nations and nationalities in Ethiopia, simply because through years of propaganda, they know this mother Ethiopia, the Christian country, the country rich with history, blah, 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 of 1,000 years, the same fake news that has been propagated. That is improving, that is changing, simply because we have come to the position where we are able to speak out thanks to the social media, the access to media generally, which was available only to regimes. And now individuals can have their own voice heard, and we are able to get our voices heard around the world. That is drawing attention. And I can tell you, and you know it very well, many human rights organizations are now writing about atrocities in Ethiopia. Human Rights Watch, just to name a few, which you are familiar with, I don't have to list for you, but they are writing, and they are writing in favor of Oromo. Literally means highlighting the fact that atrocities are being committed in our region. So it's a combination of factors. It's national interest, choices they make, at what time, when, and then the second one is we are paying heavy price for the colonial systems administration's impact on us, deprived us from getting educated, leaving the country, having access to outside world, hearing our stories for several years. The world heard about Ethiopia, not about Oromos for so many years.
Thank you, Dr. Bar. I was going to get aside a question because let's move into how do we go forward from here?
I have a question, and just relating to what we have been talking about. Yes, Dr. Truman. When it comes to internal issues, most of it is in the hands of its own people, especially the fate of a nation or a country in the hands of its sons and daughters. We know that, but these recognitions by international communities might help or would be facilitating situations for the end results of this movement, this struggle, I mean, for easy recognition of the results, whatever the Oromo people is going to decide at the end when the right time comes or when the political environment invites to do so. And because we know that there are still some international communities who have been describing Oromo liberation movements as an agenda to dismantle the way they put it, to dismantle the country, a country which is dismantled from its outset, as we are witnessing today. We see Benishangul saying, I don't belong here, Nuers and Anyuaks coming back from Sudan saying this is ours, and all that. And so that being as it is, going back to your report, and you told us, you told the world what's going on in their country, what has been going on, and maybe going to continue to happen. And do you have any plan of follow-up to your reports or some kind of plan B? Like whenever human rights reports come out, there are questions that these people on the flight are asking, like, when are those culprits taken to court? And do you have some kind of plan? We hear from some of you sometimes. How about your OSG.
Thank you very much. That's fine. These are all very good points. And you're absolutely right. One of the biggest problems we have is the false propaganda believed by the international community, despite progress made by organizations like Human Rights Watch against this propaganda. But it's still a formidable problem for us. In terms of plans to follow up reports, this hasn't been my strong suit in the past. I have made efforts at United Nations, European Union level, and this sort of thing. But other people are now taking that role for me, I'm very pleased to say. This report, the 54th report, this must be the 5th or 6th interview I've had on media about that report. Previous reports, I've been very lucky if I've had one. So that's an indication of what's happening in terms of the Oromo voice being heard over the media. We're still talking to ourselves too much rather than other people, but we're getting it out there far more than ever before. Could you imagine in 1997 when you were put in prison that it would be broadcast into Ethiopia by Oromo people from the other side of the Atlantic? Isn't that fantastic? So we're progressing, and we're progressing very well, very steadily and solidly. Not quick enough, I know, but we are progressing, and we should be confident in that. In terms of legal action in the future, yes, we certainly want to bring people to book for abuses that they've committed, and we want to spread the idea that you can no longer commit human rights abuses with complete impunity, that you will be found out and punished at some stage. We're getting world leaders now harangued in the International Criminal Court, and one day, I sincerely hope, if he survives, I sincerely hope that we see Abiy Ahmed in The Hague, in an international criminal court, called up for the genocide that he's well. Genocide is, it's too early to use that word in my opinion, but certainly mass killings and war crimes and crimes against humanity. He's certainly guilty of those, and he's guilty of all sorts of atrocities, as we know, in Oromia and elsewhere in the empire. Yes, we'll have him eventually. We've got to concentrate our forces on media and on dialogue now. That all of us are spending a lot of time talking to ourselves, and unfortunately I see the degree of racism between Oromo and Amhara, and between Amhara and Oromo. It goes both ways, but I can see that getting worse because we're talking to ourselves, we're digging trenches and erecting barriers so that communications between the urban elites, who we loosely call Amhara, and they're not all Amhara, are they? And all Amhara don't feel the same. So perhaps we shouldn't even use the term Amhara. We should be talking about federalists and non-federalists, if you like, urban elites versus non-urban elites, oppressors versus people who want self-determination. At the moment, we're just talking to ourselves and getting more convinced that we're in the right position. The urban elites who want a unified Ethiopia are also doing the same. They're talking to themselves and getting more and more entrenched in their idea of a single monolith called Ethiopia. The reason for this is fear and racism. The people who are in power do not believe that the other people in Ethiopia are capable of sharing that power. They do not believe that the other people of Ethiopia are deserving of sharing that power. And this must be attended to. It's the racist element that we can attack, if you like. because people feel that way, they assume that Oromo feel that way. It's the old zero-sum mentality. Winner takes everything. And this is the Abyssinian way of thinking, the Abyssinian way of doing things. But we are Oromo. Let's get real. Let's be more Oromo about it. Oromo people don't confront and shoot people. They talk to people. They hold long, boring discussions until the result is sorted out in a peaceful way. This is the Oromo way. We're not zero-sum people like the Abyssinians. We want to share, we want to compromise, and we've got to show the opposition, these urban elites, these people who want a single Ethiopia, we've got to show them that we are nothing to be afraid of. We are people to be welcomed, to share power with, because we want to share power, we want to share resources, and we want to share respect for human rights with every other people in Ethiopia. This is the message that we've got to get across. We should be reassuring these people who are scared, and they're terrified of Oromo rampaging through Addis Ababa, and they feel that Oromo are primitive, bloodthirsty people who must be kept away from power at all costs. And these are the myths that we have to shatter, I believe.
Okay, Dr. Byron, to you.
Again, it's very. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, let me add something question on that one. The question is how to go forward from here. Sometimes I hate to be pessimistic, to be honest. Just like Dr. Truman said, the situation between Oromo and Amara, between Tigray and Amara, between Benishangul and Amara is getting worse day by day. When you look at this situation, it feels like that is this country actually going to hold, or are we disintegrating? What do you see in the way forward from here?
This is my personal opinion. Solution to Ethiopia's problem has to come from the people. Minus that, the autocracy that we have had since the creation of that nation, it has always been top down. First, they came and occupied Oromia and the rest of our neighbors. And second, they did not stop at occupation. The colonial strategy that they implemented included, one, making sure that you forget your identity and assume somebody else's identity. Number two, make sure that you never go to school, by the way, unless you fit into the jacket that they have cut for you, which is Ethiopian. It means you have that uniform identity with your colonizers. Out of that, if you speak Afan Oromo, you will never go anywhere as far as development is concerned. I have said this over and over again. The education policy that the regime had in place in those days made it compulsory for everybody to speak Amharic and pass school exam. And there was no pass grade. You had to compete to become part of the top whatever they select for you to go to the next class. To cut the long story short, what did that do? Excluded us from gaining knowledge or growing as an Oromo, and instead grew as an Amhara. I am one of those people who got education because I was fully Amharanized. I accepted the Amhara identity. I was able to speak their language fluently, pass the exam, go to Orthodox Church, blah, blah, blah. And that is why today I'm able to reflect on what has happened to us. So this, as I said, they killed our culture, they killed our identity, they killed occupied our land. The total outcome or impact of that system is we were unable to save ourselves, fight for ourselves for so many years. Now, if you look at what happened after that, still, let me use OLF's example, how it is being perceived by these different regimes. From its inception up to today, EPLF, TPLF, and Eritrean People's Liberation Front are equally hated at the time when they were active in the field. Then, of course, thanks to the power that they were able to acquire, Eritrea went free, became a partner with Ethiopia. TPLF became a government, Ethiopia ruler, and who remained in the wilderness, the Oromo people, and the representative. The most recent event, what happened when OLF returned to the country, I don't have to tell you, over 3 million people went on the street and received Oromo Liberation Front. Why? Because that is the organization that represents Oromo people. Why am I narrating all this? To come to that, why hatred? Why do I hate anybody, or why anybody else should hate me? So the thread that you see throughout this is the most trusted representative of the Oromo people, as demonstrated with the number of people who went out to receive OLF leaders when they came back, clearly tells you Oromo's heart and mind with these guys. And then that entity is the most hated by Tigray, by Amhara, by any other entity that was able to access power in Ethiopia. What does that tell you? It is because, as Dr. Truman repeatedly said, they hate us because they are scared to death about us sharing power. Moving forward, to answer your question, what would be the solution? If we truly love Ethiopia, we want to keep Ethiopia together, we got to talk to each other. They have to talk to me in my language, as I choose, or neutral language that doesn't belong to all of us. English, French, I don't care. They have to accept my existence as a human being, as a nation. Once we agree on those basic principles and show interest to build a united country all together with equality, fairness, and justice, I don't think there is any Oromo who is not willing or prepared to reach across the aisle and talk to the other guys. Unfortunately, that is not where these people are, even today as we speak. So what is the alternative? They will never keep Ethiopia as it has been. I repeat, I said it at the last forum. Eritrea left Ethiopia, and Tigray, trust me, that is now a cancer for the country. The reality in Tigray is the major cancer for Ethiopia. Forget about having a peaceful country for as long as that province is kept where it is. And the war continues, whether it is guerrilla war, whether it is open war, you cannot change that reality. And I cannot perceive Oromos going back and becoming Amhara again. I'm not sure, but that time has gone. Just look across the board in Europe, in the United States, whose parents, Oromo kids whose parents have left the Ethiopia 20 years ago, born and brought up here, speak only English for that matter, and then they are committed and dedicated to Oromo cause. So the more people become aware, the more Oromos become aware, they are not going to give up being Oromo. They are not going to accept Amhara identity if that is what Abiy and his supporters are trying to bring about. So it's either we sit down, accept this reality, look at history, look at the precedents, and then change course. That top-down approach, dictating to the people, particularly to Oromos, hasn't worked. It will never work, in my opinion. And there are countries that are more diverse than we are, but continue to exist and thrive as democratic countries. The biggest democracy on earth, as we always say, India. I lived in India for 4 years. Walk across that continent, you will be shocked the level of diversity in India. It's a continent, and yet it's a country. And no one group. Yeah, there are issues, related issues that they're dealing with, but the democracy that they have allows every Indian to express their views and rule themselves. And it should be possible for us to do that in Ethiopia, provided we accept that we are diverse and how can we take advantage of our diversity to build a united country.
Thank you, Dr. Baru. We almost run out of time. Before we go to the last thought of both of you, let me ask, something is going in my brain when you discuss about the scared Oromo people. I don't understand that. What does that mean? Why do they scare Oromos in this context? For Dr. Suman,
It's part of the propaganda. If you want to uh, encourage people to dislike another group, then you have to present them as a threat. And this is what the propaganda machine has done. And it's partly due to the mental mindset that the old Abyssinia had. This winner takes all, this zero sum attitude to everything. No compromise, winner takes the lot, and the loser gets nothing. And this is an Abyssinian way of doing things, I guess. But it's not the Oromo way. It's not the grown-up way to do things. It's how the dinosaurs did things. And in fact, we shouldn't forget that Tyrannosaurus Rex walked the planet when Stegosaurus was already a fossil. And we are seeing the last of the fossils in power now. We're getting rid of fossils. We're going to have mammals, not dinosaurs, running Ethiopia eventually. So we're part of the mammals. The urban elites who want to keep an Ethiopia against its will as one political entity, then they're part of the dinosaurs, I'm afraid. They are going to be left behind by history.
yeah, thank you, Dr. Suman. Before we finalize the Tasfai, do you have any other question before?
Not really a question, just 2 points. Number one, the reason for being scared of us, to me, very simple. In an environment where democracy, not even absolute, some level of democracy is allowed and practiced, they know that they'll be losing the status they have been enjoying this whole time, and all the related benefits, cultural, linguistic. That I think that's one of the reasons, because the Oromos are showing them their intentions, like what Dr. Baru said. When not even 3 million, Dr. Baru is close to 5 million.
Yeah.
He came out to welcome the Oromo leaders. That's the reason. Anyways, it's not going to help anybody if we keep going the way they want us to take us. The other thing I forgot to do at the start of our discussion, Dr. Truman, the rest of us are obliged to be part of it by nature, being born as Oromo. But you going as far as accepting and adopting Oromuma and staying as a very close and strong, committed friend of Oromo Liberation Movement, I would like to say thank you very much on behalf of all Oromos. And I wish you long life so that you could stay around and witness the realization of the Oromo liberation independence in some form of independence at least. And I thank you very much. That's all I wanted to add.
Okay.
Thank you, all of you. One thing is very, very clear from our discussion. The Oromo struggle is continuing. We're getting stronger in any direction. So at some point, we get our freedom, one way or another. Dr. Truman, just like the spy says, I hope you will see the freedom of our people one day and enjoy it.
May I come back just for a brief second?
Yeah.
I thought I'd done that in September 18. When I came back to the celebration and hearing the millions of Oromo had gathered in the capital to welcome back the OLF on the day I arrived. It was fantastic, and what a tragedy to be so let down by Abiy Ahmed now. Why I became interested in the Oromo struggle is more accident, really. I'm not a saint. I was just involved with some development work and human rights work, and it was with Oromo, and I can't ignore people that I love and welcome and work with, and they are friends of mine, and as you know now, I've been adopted as one. May I put in a final plug? We have a conference, the Oromia Support Group, together with 3 other human rights organizations: Human Rights League for the Horn of Africa, the German group Oromo Menschenrechts- und Hilfsorganisation, and Advocacy for Oromo in Australia. Together we formed the Oromo Human Rights Group, and we have a forum discussion on the 24th of January. So it's a week, well, next Sunday at 2 o'clock GMT, 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And we'll be talking about human rights and the role of the media in human rights. Professor Kjetil Trondvall from Sweden will be speaking, and we're having other guests as well, but we haven't decided who yet. Thank you.
Thank you so much. If I may give Dr. Baru to say something about Dr. Truman. Do you want to jump in, Dr. Baru?
Quite frankly, I don't even know from where to begin to explain the enormous gratitude that Oromo Nation owes to Dr. Truman. He has been a champion of our people. He is one person, not being an Oromo or born and brought up in Oromo land, happen to have in-depth knowledge of our people, our cultural identity, but more importantly, the vicious atrocities that we have been subjected to. So, and he has been a voice for the voiceless 50 million Oromians for a long time. I happen to have met Dr. Truman way back, I think it was around let me remember, around 2004 or 2002 at OSA meeting here in Washington. In Washington at, what is this, George Washington University.
Yeah.
And since then, I have always been fascinated and very much interested in what he's been reporting. So we owe him a lot of gratitude. I just want to say thank you, Dr. Truman, for the enormous work that you have done, for the level of attention you have been able to draw the world's opinion to draw to the Oromo plight. That truly is remarkable. Thank you so much.
Well, both of you, all of you, Dr. Baru, Dr. Truman, testify in the name of our people and our viewers. Thank you very much for taking your time and being here and discuss about our people. And next time, I hope we will get together again. I'll see you. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. Lovely to see you both again. Thanks.
Thank you. All right.